Hi, my name's Ron Donaldson. A couple of years ago, while working for English Nature, I was asked to run the warm-up session for a big EEAC Climate Change Conference that English Nature was hosting over here in England at Oxford. The idea, the aim really, was to get people to know each other, sort of introduced to each other, but also to try and get everyone up to a level of understanding about the importance of climate change and its effect on biodiversity in Europe. So what I did, I looked and I was given the whole afternoon, and I thought, well, if I break them down into 6 syndicate groups and then get each of them to run the cognitive edge future backwards technique. So what I did is I introduced the concept of storytelling and narrative, and then explained to them that I wanted them to tell the story of climate change backwards from today, back as far into the past as they wanted, and to create a timeline using hexagons. I then asked them to envisage, if everything could go wrong, does go wrong, what hell would look like, what it would feel like, what it would be like, and then also to create a timeline for that of the events that might happen, that might lead up to hell. And then similarly, if everything could go right, that does go right, what would heaven look like, feel like, and what would be the possible events that might lead to heaven. Once all of the syndicate groups had completed this exercise, which took about 45 minutes, I then asked them to nominate a storyteller in each room. Once that storyteller had been nominated, the rest of the syndicate group moved round and circled round the other groups, and in each room the storyteller was then instructed to tell the story from their group's perspective of the start and what caused climate change in the first place, leading right up to today, and then explaining their perspective on hell and what that might look like, and then heaven and what that might look like. And then I left them for about 5 or 10 minutes to have discussions and to make sense of the material that they'd listened to before moving them on. So in all, each group made one entire story of climate change and then discussed and listened to stories from 2 other groups, so they were experiencing 3 different sets of perspectives. I then invited them to consider what the similarities might be within those stories that they'd heard, the differences, any concerns that they might have, and any surprises that they may have found. And this worked wonderfully. It really did build a lot of camaraderie between the participants on the course. They talked to each other. They were really sort of getting into the technique and happy to share their experiences and understanding of climate change and argue as to what might be the real cause. I then got them to pull out from each of their stories the highlights, the major events, the major things that defined their heaven and hell, and to put them onto big display boards which we put up in the foyer for the main conference the next day. So the next day, when the Chief Executive and various MPs and other senior officials from government in England came to the event, everyone could have their coffee and stand and read through the hexagons and talk about the stories and about the material. And I think one of the real surprises was, it was kind of a weak signal that was within the material, was this appearance of water wars and the value of fresh water and how that might run out. And it was interesting that one of the groups actually said that in their hell scenario that there was this Mad Max versus Waterworld possibility of fighting for fresh water. So what happened the next day at the conference, to my surprise, was that each of the speakers began to reference the stories that they'd heard the previous day, and they would say things like, and this is possibly one of those hell scenario events that would slide us down to hell, and that it's a very difficult and very steep path to try and get us back to heaven, but as we spoke yesterday, it's possible. And so they referenced all of these, and lots of people referenced the Mad Max water world element. Until finally, in the summing up, our director, Sue Collins, quite rightly explained that it was a very, very difficult path that we had to try and right the wrongs of the events that were causing climate change, that and regularly referenced the material that we produced. So overall, it was a huge success. I was patted on the back by loads of people for doing it, but I really felt that it did help them to make sense of the material, to bring them together as a community concerned about climate change, and to bring out a lot of the major issues before the actual main events, where there were basically PowerPoint presentations of people talking about their separate theories. This gave them a chance to interact and to discuss and to make real sense of the event.